Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Girls and Women in Sport virtual series presented by the Canadian Sports Centre Manitoba and Fit Women and Girls. And welcome to those who are joining us for the first time. As you know, today we will be discussing coaching the female athlete, looking at coaching beyond technical skills, and of course, the difference between coaching men and women. Today we are joined by Jon Rempel and Jennifer Botterill. We're so excited to have both of them. So quickly, a couple introductions here. Jon is the head coach of the University of Manitoba women's hockey team. Jon also played for the University of Manitoba from 93 to 96, where he was a three-time academic All-Canadian. Over his coaching tenure, he was named Canada West Coach of the Year 5 times and has led the Bisons to 10 Canada West finals, 6 trips to the national championships as well. He was also the U Sport Coach of the Year in 2017-2018 after guiding the Bisons to their first ever national title. In 5 other trips to nationals, the Bisons have won bronze 3 times, finished 4th once, and finished 6th once. And then Jennifer here as well was a member of the Canadian women's hockey team for 14 years and attended 4 Olympic Games. She's a 3-time Olympic gold medalist and Olympic silver medalist as well. She is a 5-time world champion and was twice named most valuable player at the World Championship tournaments. She also works as a television broadcaster, as an analyst in the NHL. In 2020 as well, she was an in-studio analyst for NBC's historic first all-women's broadcast team. She's a keynote speaker, a peak performance coach, and the CEO and president of 2 companies. And as you can also may know, Jennifer is on the hit reality TV show Battle of the Blades.
Too funny.
So I'll give you both the opportunity to introduce yourself better than I can. Jon, maybe tell us a little bit about you, how you got into coaching, and Jen, definitely from an athlete perspective, kind of what you've seen.
I'll kind of go through the Coles Notes version. I guess obviously the passion for the game has led me to where I am today. I feel very fortunate to be able to coach for a living. It wasn't something I ever really set out to do. After my playing career was over, I kind of fell into it, actually, to be honest with you. I'm really thankful for my former boss, athletic director Colleen Dufresne, whose vision was to create a full-time women's hockey program at the University of Manitoba. And I was fortunate enough to kind of be in the right spot at the right time, I guess, and kind of have gone ever since. So that's really the Coles Notes version of how it sort of has happened for me.
Great. And thanks, Jon. For me, I feel very fortunate for my experiences in sport and the path that it's set me on in my life. And so since I've retired from being a competitive athlete, I've transitioned now, but still stayed very involved in sport in terms of development roles and development programs and coaching for athletes. And it's something that I think has always been very important for me to provide the best environment possible and to help people reach their full potential. So I'm very thankful when I look back at the coaches that I had growing up in Manitoba and the influence that they had on me. And the hope is to help some other people on their path through sport and life. And that's something that's very meaningful for me.
Great. Okay, so we are going to get right into a bunch of questions here. And for everyone watching from home, office, wherever, please feel free to use the chat function there, Q&A at the bottom, ask throughout. We're open here. So I think probably one of the biggest questions to get us started is, what is the difference between coaching girls versus boys?
And do you want to start, Jon?
Yeah, I can jump in. I guess I'd start by saying that I guess there certainly are differences. I've always tried to really take an athlete first approach to coaching. I've coached both males and females at different levels. But I've always tried with both groups to really keep it an athlete sort of centered focus. I've never really made differentiations between females and males outright. There are subtle things that, I've learned over the years, things that I came into it, thought I knew, did not know, and learned the hard way. I think from speaking certain kinds of language, when I say language, I'm just talking about certain terms that you learn to use that are effective. I think females respond very well to those types of things as a rule. Jen can certainly comment further because she was in it for so long on the other side, but there's certainly things that I've really tried to learn in terms of how I speak and the kind of language I use. That's one thing that jumps out to me for sure.
No, absolutely. That's a great description. And I think there's a couple things that come to the forefront for me. And I think the one is the communication piece, where in terms of, female teams, I think really do value a high level of communication and interaction and feedback. And the second element is probably to make it as fun as possible. And I know it's different from every spectrum, to grassroots to elite athletes. But if you're certainly looking at, teenage athletes and how important it is to make the experience in sport enjoyable for them. I mean, we hope that girls stay in sport for as long as possible. And I think a key element for me having such a great time in those teenage years was that the coaches did create a fun environment. It was still challenging. We still learned a lot, but coaches found a way to make it exciting and enjoyable at the same time. So I looked forward to going to my sports and my activities. And I do think, though, that every athlete is going to be different, and you can't really put a total blanket over, a girls' team or a boys' team. But those are I think two elements that sort of stood out for me in terms of coaching female athletes, to make sure you maintain a strong level of communication and you try to make the environment as enjoyable as possible, along with, providing development.
Have you seen in your time that maybe it's more beneficial for females to be coaching girls and men to be coaching boys, or does it matter? Is there a particular skill set even that's involved between the two?
Yeah, I've always been of the perspective, and many of my teammates were the same, to have people that are most suited and most qualified for the job, regardless of gender. And I think that's something that many athletes appreciate. And when I look back at some of my most influential coaches, I think a couple of them that probably provided the best insight for me. I mean, one was my Team Manitoba coach, Cliff Wertak, when I played ringette, right? And he had a philosophy for us of saying to never look back and have to say, I wish I would have. And when I was 15 years old, that was a philosophy that stayed with me, to this day, in terms of that advice that he shared with our team. Another really influential coach for me was Katie Stone, my university hockey coach. And so she always recognized that every athlete needed something a little bit different to be at their best. So those are just two examples, but I think for any coach, it's going into situations as educated as possible, as prepared as possible, and to know that you have a team and no two individual athletes are going to be exactly the same in terms of their needs or what they're going to need to reach their peak potential and to perform at their best. So I think it's important for coaches to just, again, preparation and knowing how you want to communicate. What do you want to provide the team throughout the season, throughout the development that you're providing them? And I think for me, that's something that any gender can achieve in terms of being in that influential position.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, some of my colleagues, I obviously have colleagues that are both female and male, and a lot of them are excellent coaches, and they just go about their business in different ways. And a lot of it is drawn on previous experience and have coached for a long time. So again, the fit, what Jen says is exactly right. I think the fit within each individual team is really, really important. The communication style, how you approach, and again, I think going into this question, at the level of planning and detail that you need to really have in order to effectively coach female athletes is really, really important. I am a detail-oriented person, so I think sometimes that resonates with my group. And the question of answering the question of why is a really important thing. But I just think, again, gender is, I don't really see it as an issue if the fit is right.
Do you believe that there are structures that need to be in place from your sport administrative side, from the coaches, anything that's going to help you be successful?
Well, when you think about, is that for John? Do you want John to go start? Or?
Either of you.
Oh, okay. Well, when you think about coaches having all the tools that they need to be at their best, Some of the structures that I believe are important to include would be, access to resources in terms of mentorship opportunities. So if it's a young coach or a coach with less experience, that they have the opportunity to interact and to learn from coaches who have been in those situations before, who have coached female athletes and can provide, some great perspective for coaches that are coming in. So I think mentorship is key. And then also thinking about just resources, so they know in terms of the sort of the 360-degree approach to an athlete and all the tools that they need to be at their best. Not only sports specific training, not only nutrition or sports medicine or mental, emotional, physical wellness. I mean, all of these elements that come into play so that a coach feels, again, educated and prepared and aware of all elements that are important for an athlete's development. So I think those tools, those resources, mentorship are all elements that hopefully could provide coaches with the best opportunity to have a positive influence.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, and I feel very fortunate to work in a place that I do, where I have an administration that is very, very, sort of equity centered, and we're fortunate at the college level to be able to strive to provide exactly what Jen's talking about. And the development of the student athlete at our level is very central to how we structure our programs, and I feel fortunate to be able to be a part of that, where we all want to win and we all want to be competitive, and a lot of times still a lot of us are judged on results and those types of things. But the development of the student athlete at our level is so crucial to helping kids stay in the game when they leave the game, helping them move forward as future leaders and really contributors to society. So it is imperative that you have that structure around you, and even at the younger levels, in some of the associations, I see more female administrators, I see more female coaches, I see more females getting involved in helping cultivate that experience at the younger levels, which I think is the way that it needs to be.
Do you think that there is a way that different sports can start to recruit more female coaches? I know that in some sports it's lacking, and that's especially for coaching some girls what people really want to see. I know that coming from a ringette background, that's where we're lacking, is female coaches, even with the youngest levels. Are there programs that you think that coaches themselves can introduce, or a way to foster even some of the older athletes to develop into more of a coaching role?
I think that's also for each sport organization an important tool to implement in terms of conversations to have with current athletes or athletes as they sort of draw towards the end of their career. But it can be something in terms of even bringing in athletes to coach younger players, can sort of start it at a younger age so they know it's an option. And I think communication ties into this as well, so that athletes know it's an option and that their support would be hugely beneficial. And I think having those conversations and creating, a network and a strategy for that, to make sure that you're letting those athletes know there's a space for them. And we want to have more females involved in coaching, across the board in various sports. If I look at even hockey, stories now of people that are hired in administration or NHL pro scouts, or in assistant coaching roles or development roles, and to hear feedback from young girls to say, oh, well, that's neat. That's really neat. And someone asked Cami Granato, who's a scout for the NHL Kraken, the NHL team. And she asked her, well, how do I become an NHL scout? And so it's that awareness piece, but also I think each sport organization should have a set strategy to implement those conversations and those discussions, so that these athletes know that there is an opportunity for them to stay in sport and to give back and to be in these rewarding opportunities.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I see it happening in some regards in the environment that I'm in at the minor hockey levels. We certainly encourage our players to get involved. I have a number of players currently coaching. I've had many alumni that have coached in the past continue to coach and get involved. And I think there needs to be a willingness on the part of parents and administrators at those levels to really support young females, to keep them involved and passionate about growing the game. And I think that's where we all have to work a little bit harder in terms of providing that really support structure, in terms of mentorship, some of the things that Jen was talking about in terms of administrative decisions. It can only help grow the game. Female hockey is a very large part of the growth of the game right now, and I would love to see that would continue from our point of view and helping in the ways that we can help.
Excellent. We did have a few questions come in, so I'd love to get into some of those. Firstly, how can we change culture towards anti-discrimination and anti-harassment without relying on the system to do so to better support and a safe and welcoming environment for women?
I think that starts as well it can be from the coaches that create that environment within a team to make sure there's strong communication and meetings that happen on a regular basis so that they create an environment and a culture within the sport and for any athletes involved to know that it is inclusive, that they encourage a diverse group in terms of the sport and its acceptance and welcoming to everyone. So I think that starts again with communication and from the coaches. And sometimes a question that you can ask, is how do you want to feel at the end of the season? Or how do you want to feel at the end of your coaching career? And if you answer that question, sometimes that can start to shape how you want to approach each day, each practice, each training session, or each competition. And hopefully part of that is that you want to create a very inclusive, supportive, positive environment where you've had that contagious approach on other people. And so that's, I think, a question that it can start from the coaches, because that can be very contagious for athletes who are looking up to you in that leadership position. And that can be something that's very influential for all those that you're surrounded by.
Great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had the good fortune to get to know Coach Paul Maurice from the Winnipeg Jets, and we've had some really interesting conversations over the last couple of years. And I consider him to be he's been a really strong influence on me in the last X number of years. And anyway, further to the point, one of the things that we hashed out 6 or 7 years ago, we were just talking hockey, and it didn't really become technical. It became more part about the function of the coach in relation to creating that culture, and the thing that we just agreed on. And it seems sort of obvious, but it really isn't obvious at sometimes when you're coaching competitively and you're driving your group forward. But the feeling amongst your teammates and creating the culture where your teammates really learn to love each other is just so crucially important. And that, what Jen said, driving that from the top is a coach's responsibility. There's no question about that. And spending a lot of time and energy and communication and really thinking about what your role is in order to be able to drive some of those culture things really does make a difference.
Great, thank you. A few more here. We were looking at if you had any advice to a new female hockey coach who is feeling alone in a male-dominated coaching situation.
Do you want to start, John, or do you want
Sure.
me to?
Yeah, I mean, I do see that quite frequently, and it speaks back to my point, about providing that support, and we still live in a bit of a at the minor hockey level, we still live in a bit of a world that's driven by parent coaches. There's many good ones. Oftentimes there aren't a lot of other people that are available or, really feel confident that they can step in there and do the job. If you're feeling alone, I would try to find someone who can act as a mentor and someone that you can bounce things off of when things get tricky. I think a really strong parent liaison on your team is really, really important as well. Someone that you trust, someone that can really help guide you and kind of deflect some things away from you when needed, but also be there to help you. If you're a player, former coaches really can be extremely useful as mentors and things of that nature. So it can be very daunting for young females to be in that world. I understand that. I've had 3 of my daughters go through this process. So I've seen it firsthand. So I can appreciate where that question is coming from for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that's so key in terms of reaching out to your network and making sure that you have people that can be part of your support network to reach out to in those positions, and to also feel proud of yourself. I think that's one thing that my parents had said through Olympic journeys as well, to say at the end of it, hopefully you feel really proud of yourself. And even though you're setting a new path and it feels like you might be alone at times, you're making some pretty special decisions that you've chosen to be a coach and to have an impact on people around you. And even though it might seem difficult or potentially lonely at times where it might seem more male dominated, hopefully you can take little windows to reflect and also feel proud of yourself that you're making perhaps different decisions than other people, but that's a representation of how strong you are, and that it might not be a path that others have taken, but for you to know that you can be great in this role, and to know you have a support network there who's happy to help you.
Great, thank you guys. So I do have another one here, a little longer with some context. So saying hello to Jennifer, and the nice shout out to Cliff, as he also coached his sister's ringette team, Leah. And to John as well. So he's been coaching high school cross country and track at FRC since 2006. They have male and female coaches. So I've noticed that girls will most often always finish their workouts. And if you ask the athletes, girls and boys, to warm up for 10 minutes, for an example, the girls will complete the training tasks, whereas the boys will sometimes cut corners and not always do the full warm up. So this fall, before entering level red in Winnipeg, we had more girls show up for workouts compared to the boys. The boys will typically always be more competitive in training, though, and races. And what is one way to instill a more competitive nature in the girls? Some of the high school girls that he's coaching will dedicate themselves to doing all of the workouts, but some of them will decide not to compete in the bigger meets. So essentially, how would you deal with that and creating that sense of competitiveness or wanting them to continue to participate?
That's a great question. It's something that I have really wrestled with in all the years that I have coached, coached females at the level that I coach at. And what the person that's asking that question is bang on the mark, because I find the work ethic in females is incredible. They will do very task oriented. They will do exactly what you ask almost all of the time. Creating that competitive environment is a little bit tricky because we're getting into sociocultural things about the way that girls are socialized, and that's a whole different conversation. So it demands a lot of thinking, a lot of creativity. One of the things in our program that we talk a lot about are the 3 C's, and it's competition, connection, and challenge. And I think as a coach, you want to think about ways to put challenges in front of female athletes as a group and as individuals that they really see tangible results. They see it as not a threat to each other, but they see it as a way to make each other better, and tapping into exactly that really task-oriented behavior that drives them. I think you can sort of shepherd that into a sort of a competitive environment. We use a lot of small area game stuff in our practices, particularly at the end of practices, that where we'll keep score, and it does make a difference because it does produce that kind of environment, and really challenging each other to be better and tapping into that. So it is a tricky thing to navigate especially when you're coaching both sets of athletes in that cross country, track, and field environment. See that there be some tricks to that.
I think the way I would describe that is some elements of a positive rivalry as well that you can share. So for athletes to embrace that. And it was the same, I think, at various levels, whether I was competing in Manitoba or for Team Canada, to have that idea, I hope that you're good because that means I can be even better, and sort of embrace that competitive nature. But I will say that it's also been maybe an ongoing opportunity for me, even in my career. I mean, when I was playing at Harvard University and when I was playing with Team Canada, sometimes some of my teammates would literally sort of body check me into the boards as we were about to hit the ice because they thought I was better if I played with a little bit of an edge, right? That maybe wasn't my natural personality or tendency, but sometimes they want to get me fired up and felt like I performed better on the ice if I had that extra edge. And so I think coaches do have the potential to try to instill that in athletes, whether it's that idea of no regrets. So at the end, you can look back and feel proud of every, race that you entered. Also the idea that one moment in sport isn't going to define your worth as a person, so that these female athletes don't feel like your worth is on the line depending how you finish in this cross-country race, but to embrace that and say, here's an opportunity for me to go and be my best and feel proud of myself at the end. So those are sort of three things that I think in terms of conversations and teaching points, that idea of a positive rivalry in terms of not going to define your worth as a person and just embrace it. And then just sort of that no regrets approach. And like I said, for me, I think the edge sometimes helped me in terms of my performances.
Do you think that there are maybe some tips for parents to deal with, and they can continue to have this conversation with their kids if they think that they don't want to be continuing in sports, or the kids express that they've gone far enough or they don't see the value?
And this is one where I'm really fortunate that both of my parents were extremely supportive. But I can look back and say with both, Jason, my older brother, and I, there was never a situation of that you have to play this sport and you have to, do this. It was always our choice in terms of they wanted us to be healthy and to be active and to be involved in a variety of sports and activities, but it was always a conversation, and we could make those decisions. And so I think it was ongoing communication at every stage of our lives. But I think that's a fine difference in terms of having, as a parent, hopefully that unconditional support in every situation, but demonstrating and I think talking about the values of sport, not only short-term, but long-term, and the lifelong benefits that sport can provide, depending on the age of the athlete. I think at a young age, it is, again, about that enjoyment, right? When I was 13 and I started playing girls hockey, I started because friends of mine were playing. The whole story from my parents is they said they knew it was special because when I hit the ice, they could see my smile through my cage when I was playing hockey. And so for young athletes, I think it's finding that love, and hopefully for parents, they're part of the process in terms of finding those sports or those activities that hopefully their kids can love and can thrive in those situations, and then provide them with the potential for lifelong lessons through sport. And if I look at the girls that I played hockey with in high school, we're still the closest of friends. Some of us went on to play university hockey, some went on to elite hockey, some were done after high school, but we look back and we feel super thankful for the family support that we had that allowed us the chance to play sports during those really critical years as teenagers.
Yeah, I mean, speaking as one of those people that has three daughters in sport, I mean, and my wife, who Jen has known for a long time as well from the ringette world. So we come from that background, the both of us, and I think, I've always asked the question of them is, why do you want to play? And the answers I get are really quite illuminating for me, for my own daughters. And I've always tried to keep that in perspective. As a competitive coach, I've really tried to distance myself from the coaching person with the coaching hat on and the parent person with the parent hat on. And again, sport is life, life is sport. Jen said it. The values, the lessons learned are just so crucially important to cementing who you want to be, and it shapes who you want to be as you move forward into life, away from sport. And I just think it's crucial for parents to ask themselves that question often, why, and see the joy. And Jen mentioned her going on the ice, and my youngest daughter's the same way. Every time I watch her play, it makes me smile because she has the biggest smile on her face out on the ice. And it's just, it reinforces what we are supposed to be trying to do as parents to help our kids move forward. And I think sport just plays a crucial role. And perspective is everything for parents. I just really, really try to reinforce that to people that I speak to about having perspective about what you're watching and why your kids are doing what they're doing.
Great, thank you guys. So in our last session with Addie Miles, we discussed keeping girls in sport and the high dropout rate that exists for girls. So we looked at it a bit from the coaching side, a lot from the parent side as well now, but what do you think the best advice would be for a coach or a physical education teacher or anyone who's currently coaching, especially girls? How do you keep them participating? And would you say that there's a difference in how you would approach that with girls versus boys?
I mean, it is certainly a very important topic to be aware of, and to spend some conscious energy to make sure you're having those discussions, and provide, I think, every opportunity for female athletes and if you're a phys ed teacher, to make sure you're including enough variety. And I said this right at the top of our session about the enjoyment factor, and I think that's just so critical for keeping girls in sports, to certainly provide opportunities to improve and to develop and to get better, but to find ways to make the experience in sport a positive one, to have it to be fun. And when I look back, even whether it was when I was 13 playing hockey, or when I was 8 playing ringette, or when I was in my 20s and playing hockey for Canada, I feel like a lot of the athletes performed at their best when you had a smile on our face. And I even described that right to my last Olympic game with Team Canada in 2010, right? It was super focused and very competitive. Millions of people in the country were watching. But when I looked over at my teammates, like, we had just a bit of that smile on our face, right? And it sort of reminded me of when I first started playing the game, that this is exactly where you want to be. And so just finding a way, whether it's, little small games to do during training, or to be engaged, and just to create an atmosphere where hopefully it's as fun as possible for these female athletes, and that they want to stay. And I've seen that firsthand with girls I played hockey with, or different sports, whether it's badminton or high school volleyball or basketball, and who have gone on to be so successful in different realms, whether they're lawyers or CEOs or teachers, that have all benefited so tremendously from sport. And so I think for phys ed teachers or coaches, that's just an opportunity to create that awareness, and to educate these young athletes about the benefits of sport, along with hopefully just providing the most positive and enjoyable environment that you possibly can. That, I'm sure, requires a lot of preparation in terms of reaching out to your networks and your support. But I think that's sort of my summary of what I think could be beneficial to help with keeping girls in sport.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what I can really add to that, other than, a happy hockey player looks forward to returning to the rink, in this case using hockey, but it goes across all sports. If people want to be in the environment they're in, they're going to keep continuing to doing it. If they have a love and a passion for it, it doesn't matter what level they're playing at or competing at. If they look forward to showing up every day, that pretty much sums it up. And again, as leaders in sport communities, and across disciplines, it is imperative that coaches and, as you say, phys ed teachers and the like, create those opportunities, and create those opportunities for people to want to come back. And it is crucial to development, and it's crucial to keeping people involved, and it's crucial to helping people understand that there's a way to keep giving back, so the cycle keeps continuing. So I do see huge importance in creating that kind of environment, for sure.
So an interesting question about underperformance. So they've seen female athletes underperform in competition because they do not want to be the best. How does one deal with anxiety in races and competition?
Yeah, one lesson for me that was really helpful as an athlete, that sometimes I was really hard on myself. I think at various phases, whether I was, again, in Manitoba playing, or at different points in my career. And it was one of the lessons that I learned at university, and it was talked about the difference between perfection and excellence. And there isn't much in life or in sport that's absolutely perfect. But as a person, as a student, and as an athlete, for me, taking this philosophy of striving for a level of excellence was something that really resonated for me. And hopefully for young athletes, if that can be a piece of education that coaches could potentially share, I would hope coaches could see that difference on how to not feel like every day or every training session or every competition had to have a perfect result. That we're all human and we're going to experience different emotions, and accepting that and recognizing that and knowing that you have a support network to help you through these various emotions. But then hopefully shifting over towards this idea of striving to be your personal best and to strive for this level of excellence. And the path isn't going to be perfect, but and along there, it's recognizing these ups and downs, but you can still be the best version of yourself through, tough moments or ups and downs.
Yeah, we talk a lot about.
Sorry there, John. Do you think that there's a difference for either of you to answer between girls and boys with this? Like what they want to get out of sport?
It's a good question, because I haven't coached male athletes in a long time. But knowing what I know about the culture, having been one, I think, again, it comes down to some socialization things. And I've done a lot of reading over the years about the way males and females are socialized and still are today. And some of it is a pecking order thing, where I think in terms of, males is a little more, sort of linear, and females are still socialized in kind of a circular manner. And this does play into what that question is asking. A lot of times when female athletes want to step forward, they feel like they can step forward and they step outside of the circle. The rest of the group will have a tendency to sort of draw them back out of the circle. And I think that exactly is what that question is asking. Males tend to sort of have the alpha male up top, and they'll fight for that position. And once they get knocked off the top ladder of the rung, they'll fight their way back up. It isn't always that way. I think that's changed a lot, actually, in my time coaching females. I see actually more of that mentality. And I think, back to what Jen was saying in terms of excellence, we talk a lot about excellence, and we talk a lot about the difference between standards and expectations, and sort of, this is the standard. Now, what is your expectation of yourself, and what is the coach's expectation of you, given where you are in your training age, in your sort of age of maturity, and in our case, it's in where are you in the program, and those types of things. And a lot of those things you can key on as a coach to sort of help spur that player to want to be the best version of themselves. And I really talk about that a lot too, is you don't have to be better than anyone else today. You just have to be better than you were yesterday. And we discuss that a lot, and that seems to resonate a little bit.
Great. I'm going to loop back a bit to when we were discussing role models and female coaches. So do you feel that it is important for young female athletes to see higher level female athletes and talking with them about their individual sports, and it is important for them to see female coaches as well in their sport?
Yes, I believe that sort of that mentorship and role model position can be on all fronts, right? So for both the athletes in various sports looking into or looking up to elite athletes, or the coaches, the same thing in different grassroots levels to coaches in more elite positions. So I think that's a very important dynamic and relationship to continue to foster, so that people know that, again, that's part of your support network. And growing up, I mean, I looked at role models, again, different genders. I feel like I looked up to, I remember my brother and some of the players that he had played with. I also admired some female athletes who had played for Canada. But I think certainly when I started to watch, hockey more closely, and to see athletes performing at the World Championships, and then in various roles now to see them, diving into coaching positions at the university level or in professional hockey, or even in broadcasting, right? That was something that it's not always comfortable initially, but for people to see people in these positions, to know that it's a possibility. And sometimes we do need to push our comfort zones, to achieve even more than we have before. I mean, I was hesitant when I talked to the Islanders and they said, do you want to stand between the benches to cover NHL games? It wasn't a position that I was super comfortable in, but it was saying, okay, you know what, there's an opportunity for a female in this position. And maybe I don't have the experience, but do I believe I could provide some great insight? Yeah, you know what I do? I know the game. I can follow the game and hopefully provide some good analysis for people. So I think for athletes and coaches, to know that the sky's the limit. And I think those positions of mentorship and fostering those positive dynamics and relationships can be really beneficial for the growth of women in sport and women in coaching.
Yeah, I think it's crucial. I hope to see a time where people like me don't have a place in women's hockey, to be honest with you, anymore. I think that day is coming down the road, because the game has evolved, and I hope that we get to a point where people aren't surprised when females can do a good job broadcasting, calling a game, coaching, and those kinds of things. And I know those attitudes still exist because I'm immersed in it. And I hope that there comes a time when that happens, because I just know how many qualified, fantastic people that I've been around in my program. Some of them have gone on to coach alongside of me and have gone on to do some other things. So I think it's really, really important. I look at my daughter's perspectives about how excited they are when they have a female coach at the minor hockey level, the two that still play, and they talk about it often, and how important it is to them. So that pretty much tells me enough right there.
Great. We did have a question too about to define the breadth of what it means to be competitive, because we do look at it from every level, as competition can mean and deliver more than what's often allowed.
That's an open-ended question. I think it goes back to what we were talking about just a question or two ago, and about defining what excellence means to you. And I think there's there's certainly no harm in trying to be really, really good at a lot of different things. And I think spreading that message. So at our level, again, we talk a lot about academics, we talk about athletics, and we talk about community service. So those are the three things that we focus on just at the college level, where people can pursue that sort of piece of being excellent. And along with that, you've got to be competitive to be able to do that. And there's nothing wrong with trying to be the best at what it is that you want to be the best at. And I think continually reinforcing those messages is really important, and that it's not a bad thing to step outside of the circle and be that person who can be a driver, can be set an example, can be the person that other people look up to, can be a force in the community, can make a difference and be a difference maker. So that's an open-ended question, but I guess I'm going at it from that sort of angle.
I think that's great. I think also just in terms of that competitive nature, it's also about your personal best, and it's good to be competitive, but there's also a time in your training and your career where it's not always about comparing yourself to other people. And I think at the end, it's that self-satisfaction to know that you've tried to pursue that level of excellence in everything that you do. And that was a philosophy that, I learned from my family, to pursue excellence in everything, right? To be the best athlete that I could possibly be. But when I talked about sport not defining you, I also wanted to be the best person, the best, community member, the best family member, the best student that I could possibly be. So it was all of these things, not just one element. And I think that really helped perhaps my competitive nature to have that almost balanced approach to it, to know that when I was at the rink or training, I was focused on being the best hockey player I could be. And when I was at school or writing a paper, I was focused on being the best student that I could be. And I think that sort of pursuit of excellence can help the approach in terms of that competitiveness. And hopefully at the end, it's that internal satisfaction of knowing that you've done everything that you possibly can to be your best in every situation that you have the chance to be involved with.
Right. Looping back to when we were talking about the terminology and the way that we speak to our athletes, how do you address the wording of girls versus women? And when very seldom do we call men as boys after they hit puberty?
I've tried. It's interesting because when I do things with male groups, now I do clinics and whatnot and different things like that. I have to catch myself because I often, I'll use the term exactly, I'll use the term, okay, women or whatever. I've really gravitated to trying to use the term everyone. I think it's an inclusive term. Okay, is everyone ready? Is everyone ready to go? Are we good? I think that right there is a big deal. And it doesn't seem like a big deal to people that aren't immersed in the situation, and coaching females, but I really try to use the term everyone as much as possible. That is just something I've learned to do over the years, and it's about inclusivity, and the term just incorporates everyone, exactly what it says, and there's no differentiation. So once in a while would I use the term women or girls? Sometimes I probably do, but I rarely do it. So it's yeah, the language you speak is important because it speaks to how you think as a coach, and it speaks to the sort of direction you're trying to lead your group. I do believe that.
So do you have any thoughts on how we can encourage coaches to share athletes when this is in a rowing situation, but when they're trying to recruit athletes to rowing, and this is more at the grassroots level and kind of in those early development stages, so that athletes, they can try different sports, and some coaches find it hard to, let's say, allow their athletes to miss a practice to try something new?
Yeah, I mean, well, I certainly growing up, I personally feel like both my brother and I benefited significantly from trying a variety of sports. And it is tough to see now that kids almost feel a pressure to have to choose a sport at such a young age. And so, from my personal perspective, I would encourage coaches to share or to allow their athletes some flexibility. And I know as you get to more elite stages, as athletes get older, that might be tougher. But I think it's still so beneficial for young athletes to have the chance for a general growth and development. And my dad taught a growth and development course, in Winnipeg for years at university, and he's just seen at a young age how it can be such a benefit for kids. And I think my brother and I had the chance to experience that. And I think coaches to have an open mind and to see that and to know that that can be a huge part of their overall development as a person and as an athlete. And looking back from, years down the road, that could be a part of the piece to help them be at their best, to not feel like they have to have a straight and narrow path at such a young age, but to say there's opportunities for growth and development for athletes in a variety of sports.
I definitely agree. I mean, I'm a huge supporter of cross sport training. I think the things that it brings to an athlete, to what Jen was saying, everything from emotional, mental, obviously physical, and things that you bring back to your own team, which whatever your main sport is, are incalculable. I think it's kind of sad to see that, again, kids are being forced to specialize, and hockey is one of the biggest culprits, I think. That we're talking at 12, 13, 14 years old, and kids are in some cases being forced to specialize. I think we've got that wrong there. There's lots of opportunities to learn how to be a high performance athlete, by encouraging cross sport play. And again, the lessons you learn and the things you bring with you, will probably do more for you than being confined to one sort of way of thinking and way of training, and being in one environment all the time. I think that promotes athletes getting stale. I think it promotes them sort of losing interest at times, aside from the physical things that it does, because you tend to train in a certain way that only promotes muscle growth and brain development in a certain manner. So you have to change the way your brain is connected, and I think and how it fires. And really, cross sport training to me is a very simple way to do that, and I hope that people understand that is still very important.
So do you have any tips on how to help motivate the self-conscious female athlete, one who has all the potential in the world but is afraid of making mistakes or making a mistake in front of others? Just how to help the female athlete overcome her fears of making mistakes?
Well, it's very important to try to grow, that internal belief and the self-confidence in young female athletes. Um, I think, I think when I talked earlier about the emotions that you can experience, and I think it's accepting that and learning to be aware of what young athletes might be feeling and emotionally in terms of what they're going through, and then talking about it and communicating about it, and then finding a solution. And it's not it's sort of that response to fear. So if it's recognizing it, but if you live in that fear, that can't be beneficial for very long. But it's accepting that and having that communication with the athlete to say, you know what, we recognize, we support you, but we want to provide you every tool so that we can overcome this and take you to a place where you feel more confident or more comfortable. And so I think it's that process. Even as an athlete, they would often ask us, well, are you nervous about a competition or something? And you know what, you're nervous, and it can be an indication that you care. So if there's an athlete that might feel initially fearful, that could also be an indication of how much they care, that they want to perform well. And so it's just finding a way to hopefully transition that fear into an emotion that can be more beneficial for them, to say, you know what, it's great that you care about performing really well. Now, how can we provide you with the tools, or how can we increase that self-confidence and that self-belief to go out there and know that you have the potential to perform really well. And so accepting that fear, but then finding a solution with each individual athlete on what the transition can be to find an emotion that hopefully is more beneficial for them with sport and competition. Does that make sense?
One of the things that's changed for coaches, and I'm happy to see that society is more accepting about conversations around mental health. And the fear that Jen's talking about is often driven by anxiety. Everyone has it. People have it in different sort of the way it manifests itself, but I think being self-conscious and being driven by fear also often comes from that anxiety. So one of the hats that coaches really have to understand that they wear now is someone that can empathize, can understand, can relate, can share their own experiences with what the internal mechanism that's driving these people really actually feels like. I've had numerous conversations with a number of athletes, more in the last few years than ever before. And I'm glad that those conversations are happening, because it often, as a coach, you think it's one thing, but it actually isn't that thing. So when you get into the nuts and the bolts, and you can get a level of trust developed between player and coach where there's some deep, meaningful conversation there, you can often get to some places that are really, really important, and they become difference makers in performance. They become difference makers in allowing that person to free themselves up to do what they love to do. So I'm happy to see that there's much less stigma around that type of thing in our world.
And I'll just add, that's excellent, John. I'll just add, I remember to know that every athlete is different, right? And I think I said that earlier on, but every athlete is going to be different in terms of their needs and what they're going through and what they're experiencing. I remember at one point I was at Harvard and I felt completely exhausted, right? And wasn't performing the way that I wanted to. And I ended up going home for a week and a half. And, that wasn't something typical that athletes with a university team did at that point, but it was just sort of a unique step that we came to from the coaching staff at Harvard and my parents and my family to say, you know what, this is something that I think we need to do for Jennifer right now, and not the whole Harvard team that's taking the week and a half off, but this is something that this athlete needs so that in a month from now, in a year from now, she can be at her best. And so I think for coaches to say every athlete's going to be different. So to take that time to get to know them and interact with them and communicate with them and provide them with that support network that they need. And it might be different for each athlete.
Do you have any resources that you might be able to recommend for physical or athlete literacy, or really just anything along the lines of what we just discussed?
Yeah, well, I can certainly send sort of a list of a number one, but I also think the Sports Center for me as an athlete was honestly one of my first stops in terms of knowing when you talk about that 360-degree approach. I feel like the Sports Center was providing all of that in terms of resources for mental health, for nutrition, for physical development, for emotional wellness. So there's a number of different pieces for that 360-degree approach. And for me, whether I was training in Winnipeg or Calgary or Toronto, I feel like the Sports Center was often one of my first forms of communication to have that support network.
I mean, I would echo that. I mean, and like I said off the top, I work in I'm very fortunate to work in an environment that does support all of those things and has made great strides at the U Sport level and being able to help, um, you know, our student athletes at our level at the younger levels. I would seek out teachers. I would seek out um, friends. I would seek out former um, probably people that have maybe played at some kind of level, whether it's AAA midget or even bantam, those types of things. Maybe some coaches that people know. You know, some parents on certain teams. I know there's lots of parents on teams that my daughters have played on that have actually a lot to offer in terms of resources of those types of things. So, you know, sort of looking around and thinking outside the box. Reading books is important. You know, I'm a voracious reader, but I don't take everything from books. I take things from people as well. So I think looking at some of those things, if some of those higher level things are not available, I think there's everyday things around you that you can access and that can really help make a difference.
Great, thank you. So this one is more hockey specific because it is coming from Addie. But how much do you speak with your athletes about trying to pursue hockey at a professional level now that the option is there for them with either the PWHPA or the NWHL, sorry. Does this change the way you speak with your players heading into their later university years?
That's a really interesting question because Addie would know that those options really weren't there. And that's really exploded at our level in the last probably 5, 7, 8 years. Opportunities to go to Europe, the PWPHA, as you say. I think it really. I don't speak to them as a rule if it comes up. So, for example, we had a player graduate just this last year, and she came to me in spring, and she said, "Hey, coach, I'm going to try out in Calgary. What do you think?" And I said, "Hey, great idea. You know what? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. You have the ability to do it." And she trained really, really hard. But I actually do use it actually more in a recruiting standpoint now, actually at the beginning of their careers, because the language that I use is, this is sort of where things have come from. So back in the day, there weren't these opportunities, but now, you know, there's opportunities to possibly continue your career, and a lot of things can be generated out of that. There's you know, the opportunity to travel. There's the opportunity to make some money in the game for females. There's an opportunity to develop connections. All these different things. So I speak about it actually more earlier, and then players that become interested in that, you know, and think that they would want to try it, then I try to help them to further that opportunity. So it's really cool to see that that's happening.
Okay, great. We are running out of time here. I think we've covered everything for the questions, but I wanted to thank you guys so much for coming out and give you the opportunity to, if there was anything else that you would like to add.
Yeah, I mean, I would just, yeah, obviously thank you for the opportunity. I mean, it's just the more dialogue and the more sort of people have conversations around the female athletes. And I just think females are the key to the future of this world, to be honest with you. I think I've been blessed to coach so many great people and so many people that have had such a tremendous impact on me. You know, from the player to the coach perspective, and it's really changed how I think and how I sort of run my life, and sort of changed how I view myself as a coach. So I just encourage people that are in it coaching right now to really stay with it. Try to make yourself better, learn every day. Coaching is a craft like many others that the more you put into it, the more you're going to get out of it, and the more the people around you are going to get out of it. You know, and always keep learning, keep trying to make yourself better. And I just think the spin-off effect can be dramatic and profound. So yeah, that would be my sort of take.
Very nice. And I guess in closing, I would sort of encourage all those involved in the sport, whether you're an administrator or a teacher or a coach, is to enjoy the privilege of it, right? The privilege to have the chance to influence people around you. And I think, to sort of summarize my thought, if you can create, an environment and a culture where it's fun and enjoyable for female athletes, and you can provide the opportunity for them to grow and develop in their sport as well, is a pretty special combination. So enjoy that privilege, and if you can create those two things, I think that's a special opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you two again for coming out, and thank you to everyone for joining. Hopefully we will see you on Thursday for Careers in Sport.